Hi everybody, this is Kirstin Oliver. So this is the blog which is accompanying, a vlog which is accompanying my blog. So myself today, and you can also spot little Chick beside me, and he's very good, he's wearing his face mask, connects to one of my other blogs, and there's more there. So if you've subscribed, thank you. If you're looking to subscribe, thank you. And it's all on my channel as well. So this one today is all to do with intellectual property. I'm an arts consultant, and I actually own 4 companies and completely startup. And this is something which has hit home to me over the many years from an arts angle. And you hear this quite a lot. Intellectual property, please make sure that your intellectual property is protected. And the differences of intellectual property and the types of intellectual property, all well and good if you know what it is. But that was a thing I wasn't particularly sure. And it was in 2019 that it all came to head for me in May. And that was on one of the companies, the names. And then after that, it sort of really hit me this year as I'm starting everything up, and of course writing the virus as well. Great. So with that in mind, I thought, let's go back a bit. Let's take it from an angle of like me, who didn't know, well, I knew bits, but I didn't know all. I didn't know the background. And that's what this actual blog's about. So I don't claim I know all, no, but you're written in the text, you'll notice that I've put a lot of links in, a lot of outlines for people to subscribe at the bottom and to contact those people concerned, and also the different companies and the research that they've done as well. So I'm not claiming any of that as mine, no way, but I will say that they are there. So first thing that I'm going to go through is to do with the knead of bread and cakes. You're like, what? Right. Did you know this? It was back in the 6th century, nuts, where this all started. And that is because of the joys of the Greeks and then into the Romans. So they're literally from the 6th to the 12th century. And I'm going to very quickly take you through. I'm going to show you from now on different images in large so you can see, and just general stories as well. So you're now not going to see my face, so bye, and bye from Chick here, and you will see me at the end, and I'll just come back. So that's it from seeing my face, and I'll move on. So here we go. So what have you spotted? So the first thing was, as I said, like the knead of bread and cakes. If it was down to the Greeks, so the Greeks ran a competition, and from that competition they realised, we should be logging down the different designs of different food. So what they did was they said to everyone, right, if you invent a new different type of bread and a different type of cake, you're going to get 1 year's worth of rights for your invention. That's nuts. That is in the 6th century. So of course, guess what? Everybody all came up with a load of cool different type of cake designs. And then same with your different breads, whether they were knotted or they were like raised buns, whatever they might be. And it was written down. Those names, I don't know whether or not they're actual individuals or streets or something, but that's what it became. So once it came from that, as you know, the rest is history. So that's what happened. But you can really imagine, well, I could anyway, as soon as I was looking at this, like I've got the hot cross bun. No, I've got the hot cross bun, and all those things. And well, I've got it, and I can imagine as well. Like, I don't even know in Greece if they have a town crier, but if they did, having somebody there reading out like, I like to awardly win that the following Greek cakes and pastries have made it through to IP. That's where it started. After that, the idea of things being exclusive sort of came in. It's like, if I have, it's mine. That's something that hit true of what I was facing of now as well. So that sort of looked at another different property of who is the person who has the rights for. And this is an awful lot of the intellectual property of where things get confused. And that's what I sort of spotting. What I next spotted after that was the Romans, our amazing Romans. They were the ones who, it was actually one in particular, who came up with the concept and had it agreed for architectural design and military engineering. So, which is not really surprising, because with the Roman emperor, not just with artworks and frames of buildings and everything you see, it is utterly amazing in architectural design. So that recognition of would be really, really important. But it was the rules of what to do if somebody broke it was where the Romans came up with a list. And this is amazing. So this is down to, I'm going to say his name wrong, I'm so sure, Marcus Vivatus Bollio. I'm very sorry if I know you're no longer with us, but people who know how to pronounce his name correctly, whoops. Okay, so he again had a poetry and writers contest, and this was in the Roman Empire, and it wasn't the rules of what to do, it was the rules if you broke. This is the bit. So if a poet was being allowed to be tried, convicted and disgraced if they steal the words of others. You imagine that? Okay, so I bet that wasn't a situation of you've been a bad boy, you don't do it again, especially not the Roman Empire. My brain jumped between a mix between the gladiators and being thrown out to the lions or flogged on the streets as a public entertainment. That was sort of my view on that. You'll be tried, convicted and disgraced if you did it. I'm thinking it would be public hanging or stoning or other areas. I'll tell you now, if I was in the Roman Empire, I wouldn't risk it. So that was another angle, which started to sort of give it the you don't touch. If you want to have your own intellectual property, wonderful, but don't take the mickey. That's sort of where it come from. Architectural design, I understand. Creative arts, I also understand, and performing arts, and that's why I suppose the areas of the industry that I'm in, it becomes really, really important, because who invented versus who uses compared to who buys off or who claims, it all becomes a bit grey. So then what happened is between the 6th century and the 12th century, possibly all the way up until about the 13th, 14th, then things started to be on who owned. So this is where, for example, an Emperor Zono started sort of going about the modern world and highlighting that there's an issue where people are buying and owning. And when I mean people, I don't mean the commoners of likes of me, but in other words, rule or royal rule or church rule. So if you're an emperor or if you are a church, you're going to have more take, a more take of being able to control of this. That also means that if the church and the royal kings and queens or ever emperors, they were paying for all of this. So it's like, well, I've paid and I want, so it's mine. Cool, but that's like a client of today. So, but again, does that mean that they are the inventors? No, but that is where it sort of all started off a little bit. So fine art ranges in particular seem to be the next one. So you've got poetry, where it sort of wasn't really taken down yet until a lot later, in a sense of written laws and regulations. But fine art or anything to do with creative arts, that seemed to be the next alongside architectural, that you were allowed to be acknowledged, well, to a point. You were paid, so you acknowledged by name of being paid for. That's cool. That's pretty good, to be honest. Good start. The next one is these favours. When I looked at it, I was like, ooh, gossip, cool. No, it's not that type of favour. Well, it might be. It wasn't recorded anyway. But what I was spotting was to do with, in the Roman Empire, face these masks, and they're death masks. So the death masks were the next one. So if you were somebody who had an awful lot of money and you were able to, in your ancestry, to have your statues and have your death mask, your portfolio on the door of where you lived, then that was recorded by a team who recorded who and what, and of course the cost of that and their time, because it would have been really expensive. It's not like, I don't know, plastic. You didn't have that material in those days. So, and it wouldn't be anyone, again, it wouldn't be me. I wouldn't be allowed to have my death mask attached to my door. I don't think I want one. But anyway, that's the reason. So your death masks were next. Now those death masks, of course, became statues and other things. And again, I said that recorded of intellectual property was where it was like, we can do this. And the records, and you can see on your vases and all the pot, it's there. It's really quite cool. So that was the next one. The materials and use and how, I just thought of it, just like, wow. So even from the Roman Empire, they had this log. So then it meant that nobody was able to steal it. But let's be honest, imagine it. So reporting it to local police station. I'm so sorry, but my father's death mask was stolen off the door knocker next door. Or having to have a disclaimer for all of us which turn up. Please, can you just make sure you don't knock on his nose or his left and right eye? Yeah, maybe not. So that is sort of the next stage. Okay, so interesting stuff. After that, we then come to a different element, which is all to do with the written aspect of this. So this wasn't really kicked in until the 16th century. So there's a big massive gap of like grey area. And that was all to do with the fact that the kings and queens were enjoying that any money which is coming their way, technically they're claiming it and keeping it there. That's great and dandy. So it wasn't until this next one, which is the statue of Anne, which is Queen Anne in 1710, and the statue of Monopolis, which is another one, 1600s. These came in because of the first kings, and this is where it starts coming to the British Empire at the moment. I'm not saying it wasn't done elsewhere, it was, but a little bit later. So the US had their own ones afterwards, and then each of the countries all the way up until 1988 and 1990, everybody started to have their own as a written documentation of use of intellectual property and terms of intellectual property. So this next one, the next big one that people always seem to mention is the Acts and Legislation in 1623, and also the Statute of Anne in 1710. So this one of the Statute of Monopolis, I'm just reading across my notes, so if I glance, that's what it's for. This one is restricting the monarch's ability to take monopoly grants. Yeah, how much money was being taken over from others then on this one? And this is to do with trade. So they were inviting people in. This actually became a standard procedure all the way up in Queen Anne, Elizabeth I as well, St. James I and James IV for Scotland. That reign, Henry VIII too as well. It was like, if you go to another country and you invent something there, but you are actually British, then it's part of the British, and that's still today. Yeah, that's where I'm finding for me as well. My inventions over in Malaysia, because I'm still part of the British citizenship and I'm able to complain on both, I'm able to use them both. So that's not changed, which is nuts, because that's 1710. Okay, but the reasons for it was to be able to showcase new inventions in the country or things that they can claim. The first two, which I was like, really? Salt, yeah, and starch, yeah. Later on, other key people who gained this statutory right, that includes being able to have their work traded and their names traded by it as well. I have got on the list here for people. Thomas Cromwell, yeah, Henry VIII's aside private secretary. Another one is an Antonio Galante, I think that's how you say it. Is a Vietnam silk merchant, but he was based in the UK. So he came over, so his silks and his purchase of silks were trading gate between Vietnam and How cool's that? And then the last one, which I found, which is Henry Smythe. This is glasswork techniques. I'm assuming it's going to be the blowing techniques, so the shapes of vases and bowls and things that we see today. That again was a trading point from Europe, which is amazing. So this is the types of, but they're all arts. That type of approach was coming in next, but that was down to the kings. So King Edward II was the person who was like, wait a minute, we should be acknowledging. Why? Because like what's been happening now, where it's not just trade, but it's like a bit like extension of citizenship. That was another area that they were allowing for intellectual property and intellectual design to come from a named person. Because before, no. And even now, it's seen as a bit of a, yeah, but really cool to know. Really cool to know. Can't find any terms and conditions. Sorry about that. But I think that's because it's too old, and I think it was all changing as well. Because at that point, we're looking at like countries being invaded left, right, and centre, and empires being grown and then changed, all those other things. So it doesn't really surprise me. And the range as well that was used doesn't seem to be printed. So, but hey, just the thought of it even being started is pretty cool. The next one that you'll notice in Google and everywhere is this statue of Anne. So I'm just going to read this one through. So the statue of Anne says, well, this is for printing. Printers, booksellers and other people taken the liberty of printing, reprinting and publishing books without the consent of authors and profiteers, to the great detriment and too often to the ruin of them and their families, and preventing therefore such practice for the future, and learn of men to compose and write and use books is enacted, which is really cool. So this is to protect families' earnings as inventors of text. This starts us off of what became copyright, trademark, patent, different sections of patent, and terms of. This is it. British is to do with Queen Anne. Yeah. When you look at 16th century, right, onwards, that means the written text of the following is insane. I was like, oh, of course. Number one, William Shakespeare. Makes sense, doesn't it? So him, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Nashe, Mary Sidley, Ben Jonson, Francis Lopez de Vere, Thomas Hyde, the list goes on. All of these and more were people who were becoming associated with this act, which is great because this is what the pioneers, and sets that stepping stone that for what is now, of course, the publishers of now, of who has that original terms of an association. And I love the bit that has been written because the detriment of families and earnings, that one, even now, the only differences of between then and now is because we have, of course, screenshot issues and internet and people copying and like, oh, it's all right, we'll just download. That whole mass of free borrowing, I already know of what was happening with me, and I am doubly ablant of now. I was seeing it all the time for the last 6 years of, oh, it's okay, yeah, we can just screenshot, or we can just borrow, oh, they won't know. Really? That's somebody else's work. That's somebody else's intellectual design, and should be acknowledged. Even the smallest ways should be acknowledged because an payment. So to see it written as the pinnacle of that Act of 1710, and then that has then been developed into the next bits of 1988. Acts and laws, and then it's been revised again, and then of course you'll notice that I mention in my other blogs to do with the developments of next, like for us over here in the UK, we've got the Brexit, and I've noticed already it's commenting that intellectual property of Europe and UK for Europe in particular post Brexit, and then to start checking on the grounds of that for 2021. Interesting, especially when you go back to the beginnings of why. How is this important to you? Well, if you're an artist who is starting the journey of, do I need intellectual property? Am I supposed to have intellectual property? What is it exactly? Why is it when I contact a local lawyer, they start talking about patents, they start talking about like legal grounds of a word compared to a concept and what type of word. This is where it's all come from. And to know that it came from the Greeks and it came all the way back from the Romans after that, and it's not just that European approach. This was done at the same time for Asia as well. When I was researching, can't find the names, but once I get going, I will do some more research and come back with a separate blog to do with China. They had their own. So they had their own terms, which they still use, an ancient text on how to intellectual property. Each country and the lengths of service for IP is explained in my other blog. But I will break it down again because it's actually really fascinating. Because if you think about it, if it's for merchants and trade and you're trading from country to country, people don't want to lose their work of their entity and their culture to somewhere else. So that sort of element I get, and where and how, even back in the days, so early, is still very, very poignant now. It's like we're going round and round and round in circles, and it's all of that awareness for all. Now, the links I've put on the bottom, I've put the intriguing history, because it's just so cool. Owns intellectual property. This is a firm who explain very, very comprehensively like the history and background. Standard university readings. It's more to do with the acts as well. And again, I've got more there. My next blog to do with it is whether or not you trademark or you copyright or none. What is it? What's the difference, or are they the same? And some myths and legends as well with it. So that's my next one. If you like this one, great. If you want to know more on the further readings, great. And keep me posted. This is for everyone to do the arts industry. Copyright for music and the creative and performing arts. I'm going to go another stage further in another couple of sessions. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for reading. I hope you had a really cool couple of coffees while you're at it. And hope to see and comment from you soon. So this is Kirstin Oliver, and my website for further information is www.kirstinoliver.com. If you're actually in building trade, or you're in arts work, you're producing, etc., and you're wanting to kick off, or you're wanting an extra pair of hands, I'm ready to give it a go. So drop me a message on separately, but I hope this history starts to give you some little bit of ideas. So bye for now. Bye.